Good evening, everyone. Just let me do some bits of housekeeping to stop my phone making a noise, and we'll just wait a little bit for people to have the chance to catch up. Don't want that. There we are, because it's been a while. Good evening, Blanche. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Let me find myself on my phone. I've stopped all the noises, so that's always good, I think. Right. There we are. There. And then we can concentrate. It's just that sometimes it doesn't always do things. Good evening, Blanche. Well, let's just wait a little bit and see who might or might not join us this evening. Don't need a pair of scissors for the evening. It might be a slow start because it's a while since I've been live and people have busy lives, so it's not always that practical. There's an air bubble in there, but that's okay. That is okay. So, it looks like we might have some people join us. Good evening, Juliana. I think it's Juliana, isn't it? It's said with a Y, not a J in English. There we are. So I've done my usual 3 tons of mountains of resin pieces, and I've prepped most of these already with some gesso. You can see that they're prepped with gesso because they're no longer shiny. And we're just going to, whilst everyone comes in, I'm just going to coat my King of the Woods. And these have all come from one mould from Stamperia's Owl House collection. Because it's now sort of at a time where we might vaguely be thinking about possibly Christmas makes. I know, hurrah! But it is getting close. It's about 7 weeks to Christmas. So there we are. Good evening, Connie. Thank you for joining us this evening. As ever, there's lots of detail in these Stamperia moulds. So let's just give this a little coat. And these can go off to the dry. We're going to prepare our background. I maybe haven't cast this as well as I might have done, but hey ho, because some of these pieces are attached. But I'm fairly sure, so they might have been more separate if I'd not cast so much or them quite as deep. But that is what we've got, so that's what we're going to deal with. So those have now been prepped. If you try and paint resin, which is a type of plastic, directly, then you run the risk of your paint flicking off. So the Prentart Primer Paste gesso works really well. And because it's winter and it's pitch dark outside, although I have changed my lights overhead, so it's now a nice neutral white, I can now put these in front of my fan heater. So if you can hear a noise in the background, it is my fan heater going, which will have the plus side of being able to dry stuff relatively easily. So I ummed and ahed about my background and what I was going to do. So there we are. Let's pop that in. So, hello Isabel, hello Sheila, thank you so much for saying it's nice to see me back. I wasn't expecting to be back on a Tuesday. I had asked to move to a Thursday, but that seems to have not happened. Anyway, that's just life. And, you just have to go with the flow of these things, don't we? And get on with it. Because why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? Let's just grab some bits and pieces because I've got, as usual, the floor covered with all sorts of stuff because that's just what we have. Good evening, Jill. I hope you are feeling better because I know you have been poorly. Hi, Jacqueline. Welcome. Let's see if this paint, which has been, no, that dark blue is not going to work. Just bear with while we, so shuffle that in under, but it's for bin. And So this, we'll just grab another one. I hope that this is, I am bit by bit going through using up my pots of paint because they just need to be used up. And before I open new ones. So this is Decor Paint Chalky in Indigo, which is a bluey grey shade. I'm just going to pop, and I've just got a piece of MDF here. Now this MDF bauble, for those of you that are in the UK, comes from Personal Impressions, but you could just as easily do this make on an A5-ish canvas, or you'll expand it a little bit and do it on a bigger canvas. The bauble is about, well, it's 12 inches top to bottom, but that does include its hanger. So yeah, lots of options for the base of these. I just thought we might start to think about making winter stroke, maybe Christmassy, vaguely. It's not going to be overtly Christmas because beginning of November is just a tad too early for that in my head. Good evening, Julie. Welcome, my darling. Thank you for joining us this evening. So that can now go tuck there on the floor, and then we'll give this a wee dash dry, which will work quite nicely. And then we can pop another medium on the top and let it settle down. Or we set some painting of those resin pieces. And although it looks like there's a lot of pieces, it won't take that ridiculous amount of time. Oh, excuse me. For them to paint, because it never does, does it? No, of course it doesn't. And that's what he's done before anyway, isn't it? And we need them. So hopefully, we'll do that. And then I'll talk to the guys at Pentacolor. So we're going to, well, I will be doing that to my regular weekly lives. It might be Thursday rather than Tuesday. Blanche, if you're still on, with me swapping to a Thursday instead of doing Tuesday cause you problems, so I know you currently do your lives on a Thursday. Typically you or the first, isn't it? If it's going to cause problems, then that's another matter altogether. So I don't intentionally want to cause anyone problem. I love that indigo blue. It's just a really nice bluey grey shade. Let me just put that off in there. That's got my computer ringing. Good evening, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And for sharing, as you normally do, my darling. It's so worthwhile, so appreciated. I know you've tagged me in lots of different posts on crafting together with all brands. I've been a bit busy on Saturday evening. I was away for the last 2 weekends, so that's why I haven't appeared to watch and support the lovely Kate. But I have seen your messages that you've had me, and I have looked back after the lives, because that's the joy of the Facebook lives, is that we can come back and see what's going on. So this is not, Julie, going to be over in Christmas. It's definitely going to be more winter. I love Christmas. I love all things Christmas. But there is definitely a time and a place. And it's a little early for my brain. Just a little. Who's that? That's reasonably dry. That's always a good start, isn't it? We'll pop that there, and then hopefully I'm not going to be upping and downing off the floor. So I want an interesting background. I'm going to add some details on top of the background once the first things are there. But So we're just going to create a background. And because Pentart have concentrated for the last best part of the year on wall decor products, and also the more recently released fine acrylics, fine artist acrylics and things. Let's find a brush that's matter if I can cracker. I thought I'd go back to some of the basic mediums today, because I think it's always worth a little revisit. So this is the 1 component crackle medium. So this is a almost like thin honey in consistency. Don't need thick glare, and it doesn't matter particularly which direction it goes in. So we're going to make a classic weathered effect background using the 1 component crackle. This is a crackle I describe as a PCP crackle. So by that I mean we put down a layer of paint, we then pop our crackle medium down, let the crackle medium dry, and then add a layer of paint over the top, and the top layer of paint then breaks up over the 1 component crackle, and it's the only 1 component crackle that Pentart have. Thank you, Blanche. Good evening, Jackie. Welcome, my darling. So it's good, isn't it? So I'm inclined to agree with the sentiment. Let me just pick up some of that. Right, I'm going to have a little wipe down. My little MDF bauble can go on the floor in front of my fan heater. This time it won't dry as quickly as it would in the summer. Let's just have a little wipe down and keep our surface vaguely respectable. I say vaguely because it's me, isn't it? And so we all know it won't stay respectable, pristine for very long. There we are. That's a good starting point. There we are. So the stag is still wet, so let's leave him over there for the moment. Let's concentrate on these leaves. Now, all of these pieces have come out of this mould. As I say, it's a mould that comes from our house collection. So it's got a leaf frond, definitely not a wintry thing, 2 different sizes of deer, making it ideal for different size products, lots of separate leaves, the cones, and some wood bits for you to do with as you please. So a useful mould, I feel. Let me just pop this where it should be. On there. There we are. And let me grab some paints, because why would I not want to have some paints? There we are. And we're going to do my normal style of painting. So I've got a collection of acrylic paint mats out here. This one is pine green, and I've treated myself to a new pot. Who would have known? Yeah, I do have there we are. Let's just open that. Pop that over there. I have managed to get through a whole collection of my paints, and now have. So let's just pop that there. Let's just spoon out a little bit of this beautiful pine green. We'll take that dried piece from the undersurface of that seal out of the way. Try not to splash it all over myself, because really that's not what I want to do over a new top, because you might not be able to see it from the little picture that you can have of me on the screen at the moment. Well, over the last year, since March, I've lost 25 kilos. So we now have some olive green, which is also a new pot. There we are. I'll have a little bit of that onto there. So I had to buy myself some new clothes because nothing else was fitting. It's very inconsiderate, this weight loss malarkey. But anyway, shouldn't really complain. This is this one is thorn green. So these are almost certainly colours that you have seen me use multiple times. The only other one that I really use on a very regular basis would be khaki. So those can now go top there. Thank you, Jackie. Just needed to happen, my darling. And I've even got nice brushes. I know. Right. So, Julie, depending on which brand of paints that you want or don't want, as the case may be, there are now, unlike a year ago, multiple retailers of Pentart products in the UK. So I'm just going to blend these colours together. So they're being bought in by a distribution house called Design Storm Distribution. There we are. Let's have it correct. But they have around 35 different retailers, not all of whom I think will have them. But the lovely the lovely Helen, who is the owner of Design Storm Creations, has them in her shop, just like Home Interiors. So you can get them there, or you can get them from TCHL Interiors, which are based up in Rawtenstall in the northwest, and they ship really quickly, and I'm very lucky because I can just nip up and get. So it's worth just having, if you want lots of the Pentart products now that have been really quite difficult to find, they're now super easy because there's plenty. There are some nice stockists that have got a really good range of them. I know the boys have bought in quite a lot of 20 ml pots, which is rather than the 50s and the 100s that I have, and they're really helpful for colours that you might want but not necessarily want masses of. So yeah, there we are. So we've got some leaves there that are not a single flat colour, because they wouldn't be. So have I answered your question, Julie, by telling you where to get them now? Because hopefully I have. Let's say the boys will ship out almost certainly the day up if you order it in the evening, it's likely to be shipped to you the following day. They don't ship on a Sunday for obvious reasons, but they have two delightful young ladies in the shop when they're not there who will process and ship, pack the orders and get them out. So that's also quite cool, I think. So I'm just mixing these colours up. You can argue these should be pines, but there are permanent greens in the forest, aren't there? Or you could argue that we could, this is definitely artistic license in the sense that that I'm not going with autumn colours, but equally, I didn't. I've got these out there all together in the mould. It just makes sense for me to use those. And I want a woodland scene, not necessarily Christmas. So hence my choice of the colours rather than just going with autumnal colours. And I know they're not really winter leaf shapes, but hey ho, who cares? In a project that is definitely one that is more dreamt up. It's not quite the word I was thinking of, but not quite. It doesn't have to be entirely realistic. As long as it looks nice to your eyes, that's all that ultimately matters, I think, with these things. Art is very much in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? There isn't necessarily a right or a wrong. There we are. And leaves definitely are not all one flat colour, so we're not going to have them all as one flat colour, but there we are. These actually make quite good bushes on other projects, if you can find the mould, then it's quite useful one to have. There we are. I'm going to say the paint quality from Pentart is fabulous. So let's just get. It's just not viable, I think, Julie. That's the problem. It's just not viable. TV sales have really not picked up since things went pear-shaped just over a year ago. They were, so in fact, is it a year ago? Maybe it's not nearly 2 years. Anyway, since whenever it went all pantsed up. So it's just not worth it. It's by the time you've got travel expenses for the demonstrators, the TVs taking the amount of money that they take, it's difficult. It is difficult. I definitely miss being able to get LeBlanc products easily, I have to say. And she was also, when she was on TV, a fabulous source of Pentart products as well, wasn't she? So, so it's a double hit. But there you are. Such is life. If people just watch TV for demonstrations and don't buy, the companies won't go on. And that is just the facts of life, I'm afraid, ladies. There we are. Let's get these. So there we are. We've got leaves that are not flat because we've mixed our colours up. I said it wouldn't take a ridiculous amount of time, didn't I? There we are. There we are. Because we don't want, leaves aren't just a single colour, are they? So we've got shades of green on there. So let me just clean my hands, and I'm going to clean my palette knives. I'm not going to worry about putting this back in the pots, but that's fine. Let's just wipe that off, then I can use those again and not to contaminate my pots. Am I behaving for a change? Yeah, probably am, aren't I? Double dipping is my normal. But hey ho, sometimes you just have to not do that. Now don't take your don't take your dirty hands and then lift them up. So that's just fine. Let's have a little bit of ivory. This is again a Decor Paint Soft, but you could just as easily again be an ivory matte acrylic. It's just the one that's open. Let me go with there we are. So we have Earthy Brown. Now Earthy Brown is one of the paint browns that is in the Rust paint set. So you may already have that. Let's just pop that there. Sit that there. And let's go with some red brown. This is why you have to have every shade known to man and a few more on top, if you're me, because sometimes it's just easier. And that is chestnut, so it's a softer brown. Right, well, that might need a spritz of water adding to there. Oh, I apologise, ladies. That will have made you all go distinctly seasick. There we are. Let's just move that back. And while I pop that into there, it's water into here. Squirting water over your computer electronics is possibly not wise, but hey ho, There we are. Hopefully that will rescue that. And if it doesn't, well, it won't really matter. There we are. And we have a little bit of compact powder, which makes a great skin tone, even though I am fully aware I don't have anything that requires a skin tone on here at the moment. So let's just clean these, pop those over there, out of the way. That's my palette knives that I'm talking about. Let's find some clean brushes. I've got one or two lurking. Yeah, I have. Right, let me just pull my chair up. I'm getting fed up with being stood up. Let me just move that down. Otherwise, all you're going to see is that's better. Is my head, which might not be the best look in the world. That's still a bit. A bit wet. Let's just move this and turn those round. And then give that a little bit of a blast, let the resin warm up a little bit, and as it cools down, some of that will dry a bit more. The pine cones are already dry anyway. So let us just take a brush and let's just take some of these colours, self-mix, and we're going to add some distressing to these anyway, so it won't matter. We're going to be really simple, because why not? Maybe we're not going to flick it all over the painted pieces we've already done that we don't particularly want brown, but hey ho, let's just do that. So let's just mix these up a little bit. Again, this, it's just because I don't want a single flat colour on my pieces, which is why I'm doing that. And then whilst this is wet, I am just literally going to wipe off the surface so that we have some shading and a bit more texture. There we are. So we've got lots of colour variation on there. There we are. Let's just do the rest of these so that we've got these sorted. And if I move that over there, so this, as I say, this really dark cut brown is earth brown. Then we have reddish brown, and the more orangey one is chestnut. What I'm just digging in now is chestnut. So we can have a mix of the colours all together, just build up the variation. We'll all merge a little bit together, but that's fine. And then we'll wipe back just off the surface. There we are. So let's just have a look, continue to do this. As I say, this is a relatively quick way of distressing. It doesn't involve loads of layers, and it just makes for a nice project. If you're not careful, you can end up wiping back all of the paint off the surface. And I don't particularly want it white, but I think you do have to, but you can wipe it back just enough to be able to define the texture a bit more. And for me, it's a technique that is simple and works, and I'm not intending adding to these pieces, though I might the stag any distressing gels tonight. So as I thought I would take this back to the basics. So simple acrylics, one component crackle, simple painting. We might do some dry brushing because that will also is also quite helpful, isn't it, when we're doing these things. But sometimes it's good to go back, I think, to some of the more basics. It's easy for us, I think, to forget the basics and to get carried away with uber complicated things. But having said that, I really don't do complicated, as we all know. I tend to have a fairly simplistic approach to life. There we are. It's definitely working in terms of giving me variation, colour variation, isn't it? Yeah, which is what I wanted. And this is a quick way of painting moulds rather than spending forever doing it. You're welcome to paint each bit separately, bit by bit. Is that a flower? I think I'm going to treat that as a pine cone, rather that's been chopped off in pieces, rather than as a flower. I might be wrong, but that's, to me, it's going to be a bit of a pine cone because it comes out that mould, and there aren't any other flowers on the mould, so I think that has to be what it is. But it could be a flower, I guess. But anyway, that's not what I want it to be, so we'll not make it into one. There we are. I'm sorry if you can hear the wind. It's decided that it's going to throw bits off. You've got lots of trees in the garden. It's definitely decided that it's going to. I think I've taken that just a layer too far on that one, so I'll add a little bit more paint. It's taking all the leaves off the trees. We're lucky to have lots of trees in the garden. There we are. Let's just wipe that down and then give my hair. There we are. And I'm going to give my hands a good wipe because I want to pull my sleeve up. And I can't really do that with icky mucky sticky hands, can I? Because they'll all be covered in paint. There we are. Let's just pull that sleeve right up out of the way. Right. Let us establish where our. You can still see that there's bits of the stag where the gesso, which is why I added the gesso in first. Onto here. Or why I've pre-painted lots of the leaves with the gesso. So I would say, said earlier on, there is this big stag in the mould, and there's also one that's about that big. So it's great, for doing different size projects. This one is definitely a statement. I'm quite happy to have a statement back. There we are. Let's have a cleaner brush because that might be helpful. So I'm just going to take the compact powder. I mean, you're going to think, really? Why are you choosing compact powder for the mane or the underbit of the stag? But all will become clear because it won't stay looking that colour. So let's just take some of that reddish colour because we have red deers in the UK. I don't know about whether that's universally, but that orangey, and the red deers are not red at all. They're definitely brown, but there we are. I think that will work. That's going to look quite nice mixing those colours. But sometimes you just need, I think, a softer colour for some of your makes, and so starting out with that softer compact colour, which has got a brown, a skin undertone, so it's not pink, well, it's vaguely shaded of pink, but it's just going to allow me to, there we are, let's just take that and add in so it looks a bit more natural, I think. There we are, we will carry on and get sure we've got all of the nooks and the crannies. There's lots of nooks and crannies in this, and this one I am definitely going to be antiquing, because I think that's it will benefit from it. There we are. Let's have some of that reddish brown. Don't mind about covering over that eye, because I can deal with that by painting over it when I want to. There we are. So we're mixing in. Might be a bit pale. We might have, but remember, if you're going to add an antiquing product to something, it will inevitably darken it. So you don't necessarily want to start out with a very dark surface in the first place, because that might not give you the overall finish that you want. There we are. Take that up onto that, and we can add some more touches as we want. Right, let's just take that and add some softness into the centre of that ear, and some softness into the centre there. And because I've already got my other colours on there, it means that there isn't a harsh transition between the inside and the outside of the ear, because I'm mixing the colours as we go. There we are. Yeah, that's not looking so bad. Not looking so bad. It's lacking depth, but we're going to sort that out in a minute. There we are. Always add some dry brushing to pale things, to soften things as well. Now, at Lyme Park, which is my nearest big park, the deers are in rutting season, and their antlers are really quite dark. Except at the very tip. So we're going to do this, and then we'll add some extra colours in for the rest of it, so which is one of the reasons why we've got that earthy brown out. Then I was going to do them white, and I did a manara about getting some velvet powders out, but they're definitely not covered in velvet at the moment. They're being used for mating and rutting. So we'll do that, and then we're going to give these a little bit of a dry, and then we'll add some white to the top towards the end, so that the tips are not stark brown. There we are. Hopefully. There we are. And of course, they grow their ears fresh each season. Oh, all that effort into growing your antlers, only to drop them and have to regrow them a year later. Seems utter madness to me, but that's absolutely what they do. And apparently they're quite pointed in real life and can do an awful lot of harm. I don't think I'm going to go arguing with a stag, a deer stag to find out whether that's completely true or not. I think I might just keep away from them. Might be the wisest option, mightn't it, to stay away from animals intent on having on mating. There we are. going to clean that brush in a minute. So there we are. Because I've missed some of the reddish brown around the edges. Hi, Helen. Welcome, welcome. So Helen, ladies and ladies, I don't think there are any gentlemen watching at the moment, is the owner of Design Storm Distribution, and also Just Like Home Interiors. So she is online. There we are. I think that's better. Let's go up there is the brown. And I'm going to give this all a bit of a blast dry because it needs to have a blast dry. And like, how on earth do you? So you have to turn your pieces upside down, back to front, inside out, and generally be a contortionist to make sure that you've actually got all of the bits. I know. Really, it's very inconsiderate of the mould to have lots of nooks and crannies. No, very wise, Julie. I think not to argue with a stag, and certainly not one in mating season. There we are. So that looks okay. We are going to add some features. Don't you worry. He's not going to stay eyeless. In fact, we might add. See if I can give that a bit of a dry. I can see some areas where I've clearly missed the dark brown. Fine brush that I was using. Of course, it'll be the last one to pick up, won't it? Because why would I pick up one that's why would the one that you pick up be the one? Yeah, the first one you pick up be the one that you actually need. Let's get some of these a little bit of a blast dry. Most of these are not going to need any varnishing tonight. No, you're not hiding incognito tonight, darling. Not happening. Not happening. There we are. Let's just give these all a bit of a dry. If I heat these up, I do need the stag to be dry through and through. That's just, I always add white highlights right at the end, but will add the eye in, and I'm good. That's a bit of a manky brush, if I do say so myself. Let's pick up something that isn't quite so cream crackered. So let's just add in that brown eye. That will make it look a little better. There we are. Let's just add a little bit of depth into there and spread it out. There we are. That will work for the purposes of the process. Cool. Let's give you a blast dry. And then the conceptual. Oh no! No, you definitely can't heat gun a plastic bauble. It really doesn't work. Ask me how I know. Because I've done that on one that I thought was more Gore-Tex than plastic on the light, and I warped it too. So I'm not intending doing anything fancy with those leaves at this moment, but I do need to get them dry. I definitely need this dry, and he needs a varnish because he is going to get altered. Yeah, it's easy done. It really is easy done. There we are. So we have out some Decor varnish. Decor varnish matte. Ooh. You can pop that paint over there a little bit further away from the heat. Hopefully that brown is dry Hopefully that brown is dry enough. No, it is not. I can see it's definitely wet in the depths of there. Definitely wet in the depths of there. So again, back to basics, because sometimes that's what's needed. If you're going to add a distressing layer to things, then it is sensible to add a protective varnish to your layers as you go, to reduce the risk of you wiping off and going back to the base layer of the resin. It's really quite easy to do that if you're not careful. So if I'm using antiquing wax, antiquing paste, antiquing gels, or laser gels, which are all different products for aging and distressing, or sitting into low lights, then you'll find that I've got a pot of varnish out to do that with. So I'm using the matte because I think that works best for this project. I quite often will use soft touch if I'm doing something that I want to have a feel of fabric, and I could use soft touch on this to have the more the touch feel of almost velvet, so fur. But as it's not a project that's going to be picked up, we're going to stick with the matte that's already here. There we are. I am aware I'm going to add some ivory highlights to the tips of these, but I'm going to do that after I've distressed. And the only reason that I'm varnishing in this is because I want to add some more depth to the fur on the features, and that's definitely going to be easier and safer for me with a layer of varnish on my megs. There we are. There we are. Let's just give that a goodly rinse. Goodly rinse. It isn't dry now, which we'll be able to see because it will go as we want it to. And in fact, we might just explore the base and see if I can pop that in front of the fan heater by my feet. Oh, that can spend some time drying because actually the base needs a little bit more of the dry before I can add the next layer, which will just need me to apply a different plate, I think. I'm not going to manage to get it all into everything. So I can see that my one component crackle is still too wet to add my second layer. Good evening, Georgina. Welcome. Welcome. I haven't knowingly seen you watching one of my lives before, so welcome. I am one of Pentart's creative team. I tend to do a live most weeks unless there's a special launch products that are really not in my skill set, and my lives will always be in English. Wednesday's lives are pretty much always in Hungarian, and Thursday's lives are generally in English with either Greek or Spanish, depending. On which creative is actually doing the live. You're most welcome. The lives go out regularly at 6 o'clock. Currently they look like they're going out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. So if you like and follow the Pentart page, then hopefully you'll get notifications of the events that are set up, and then you can click on interested to get a reminder when we're going live. I tend to share what I'm doing to my social media pages, and I know Blanche is also watching this evening, does the same for her pages. And you're welcome at any time. We will always try and explain what we're doing and help where we can. For context, Pentacolor are a Hungarian company that specialise in making paints, pastes and mediums. They are chemists by background, which is why they make paint, pastes and mediums, but they also are a distributor for Stamperia products. And so you will see me using a lot of Stamperia products in my makes because that's the instructions. So the rain has arrived in the northwest of England and is now hitting my conservatory roof quite nicely. Because it is drying quite nicely, possibly, maybe. Yeah, yes, it's drying. Yes, it's drying. The next layer will dry relatively quickly, and that's leaving my varnish plenty of time to dry. Oh, and we've got a hair in there, and that's always helpful too. There we are. Well, that's still a bit wet down there. So in the summer when I do these, I almost, it dries so quickly, I often don't even need the heat gun out. But winter has arrived in the UK, and after the drought of the summer, we're now getting a lot of rain, which we'll complain about because we're English and we like to complain about the weather because it's just part of the national psyche is complaining about the weather. In fact, you wouldn't be British if we didn't complain about the weather, I think. Right, let's just grab. So I don't want a single layer colour on here. I'm just going to grab that white and pop that on there. I'm going to pick a bit more of that ivory. Pop it onto here. And I'm going to, oops, there we are. Mix that onto there. So I tend to, when I'm doing my one component crackles, have a dark colour underneath and a contrast colour over the top. So this is ice blue on there. We're going to have a little bit of a Heinz 57 top coat, which will crackle. And this is country blue. There we are. Decided that I clearly want to challenge my husband into having to wash lots of palette knives later on. There we are. Now my preference, she says, there we are, for top layering, you can brush. Please don't go over your brush strokes though, because it will make a mess, is to use a sponge. And I've got all three colours on here. And I will make sure I've got a reasonable layer. But it's going to give me a variegated feel rather than it all being a single colour. And I'm deliberately loading reasonably well. Let's get rid of that lump. So this is going to give me colour variation. It's not very specific, and that's absolutely fine. It's just going to give me a very nice ombre mix. And I am definitely not scrubbing when I do this, and definitely not when I'm going over layers, because if you do, you will absolutely lift your crackle back off. I'd rather go back over with an extra layer of paint than try and spread what is on there. So that, and let me heat gun this for you whilst the next layer is in. But it's an easy way of creating a background that has interest. And as I lift this up, I can see that this is already crackling. Yeah, so it's definitely already crackling. And I've got a good mix of different colours. That area is going to get partly covered by the nape, so that won't matter. But I can see some lines. There we are. So this is a very, very well behaved crackle medium. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, with the light shining, but it is crackling beautifully. And I like that pouncing technique because you get a crazed effect rather than lines of peeling paint. If you want a more peeled paint effect with bigger crackles and in directional crackles, then paint it on, and the long crackles will, if you paint that way, because that'll be where your length of your crackles will be. This is going to just give me a subtle background, and that's fine because I'm going to add some extra layers over this ultimately anyway. I now need this to be properly dry. I know where I'm going with the project, which is always helpful. Yeah, so where the crackles are thicker, where I put more paint on down here, you can, they're definitely there. But that area will now need a lot more drying. There we are. Okay. Now, that's a reason. Where's my stencil brush gone? Oh, there's a stencil brush. Okay. So, which one do I want to use? I have two stencils. I'm actually going to go with this one. Or I think she says, having put that in her coloured paint, so let's just pop those over there for the moment. That blue paint can go over there. These can come over here. One green. So this is a stencil from the Stamperia collection. So let us just add. So when stenciling, load your brush, offload your brush, and tap through. Lots of thin layers is better than lots of thick layers. It doesn't have to be specific. And I know flowers aren't going to be brown, but they are going to be in this world. And let's just take that and add some of that brown. Stiff brush. Can take some of that over. I'm going to come back, take some of that up onto there and deepen that colour. And it won't matter if I pick up some of that softness and mix it in. And what I'm doing now is taking the colours that I used for my pieces and then lifting them into the background. There we are. So let us just, the joy of a stencil, of course, is that you can move it around and you can go left to right, back to front. You don't have to have it all the same way. Now I'm actually not going to flick this over on here because I'd have to clean it each time I flick it over. which I could do. To be fair, it wouldn't do me any harm to do that, but there we are. Let's just add in. So this I'm using acrylic paints for this. You could, Pentart do have a range of stencil paste that you could use just as easily. I could have picked up a metallic paint if I'd wanted to. That might have worked as well, but we're keeping it, as I say, pared back to basics, because sometimes it's really quite helpful, I think, to actually not overcomplicate things and to think about things that are easy for you to do, things that don't necessarily have to be complicated. You can layer stencils. There's lots of different imagery on here, which is also quite nice. I'll just give that border around here. There we are. Patience is definitely a virtue. I might need to get some more of that green paint out. Where did I put me? That's where I put my green paint. Let me just fish some of that out onto there. It's very naughty, but these are paints that only I am going to be using. So when I've contaminated it, I've only got myself to blame. So I'm just playing with this, by changing the angle of my stencil. It's just going to look just that little bit different each time, and that's the look I'm wanting. So that's also just fine. And I can layer over this where I want some gaps, or where I can see some gaps. So I might just add a few pieces of yew there. I've got another leaf I can pop into there. Fill up these areas. Let's just take that round there. All right. I think I'm going to add some flowers into there and take that off over there. There we are. You can add as much or as little then as you want. And you can carry on then to your heart's content, can't you? And I'm just going to swipe around that edge. So that's the stencil that comes from, again, both those stencils come from our house collection. There we are. And just take that green around the edge, what's left on my stencil brush, just to give myself a little bit of a frame and link it all together. There we are. There we are. And why am I doing it suddenly into the middle? That will become clear. Doesn't have to be perfect there. just softer, an impression that there might be something there. Some of this is going to get covered. Just adding interest to this background. I will behave. There we are. Okay, so we now have our framed piece. That can go there, that can go there. I will need the white, which we've got over there, so that can go over there. Let us see if our deer is quite dry. Of course the deer is not quite dry, because why would it be when you need it to be? There we are. So let's just pop those pieces, balance skew with feet up there. Let's give this a blast dry. And then we can add some interest to our beer. And then start assembling everything. Right, is everyone okay? Are we still okay? Yeah. Is everyone going to sleep? So I apologise for boring you. It's not intentional, honestly. So I have got an antiquing case over here, and it's Umbra in the wall lasser. Okay, and that's because I just want to add something into here. Now these are permanent when they are dry, and you think you just painted that in all those different shades of colour, and now you're whacking that dark colour over and scribbling it into all the nooks and the crannies. And I know I am, and it's entirely intentional. Entirely intentional. As I say, this oh, I didn't necessarily want to do that, but let's just match the other ear up, and then we'll have a little white back. Let's make sure. So this product, once it's dry, is permanent. So if you want to wipe it back and use it as a distressing medium, it certainly is. There we are. But it just makes such a difference to the pieces. There we are. And you can wipe back as little or as lot as you want. And I would often distress everything, but we're not going to today because I wanted a wintry feel. Now then, there we are. So I'm just going to pick up some of that ivory and just tap the ends of these, because the tips of them are, we can add a bit more white down into here. So there we are. And these little touches just really do help bring things to life. And I want little dots for the eyes. Let me see if I can find a suitably small ball tool. in amongst my large selection of stuff, of course, because I want the smallest one possible. Will it be there? Of course not. But we do have a needle just to add a little highlight to the eyes. There we are, making him all the less scary. Right, that can go in there, that can go in there. So, things that I don't very often use, but because. So I have two waxes here. I have green, which is a greeny gold, and I have turtle green, which definitely has a grey undertone. Okay, so we're just going to and because I want a wintry feel, this is sparkling silver. So I'm mixing these all up on the surface to give me almost a frozen feel. And this is why you need every colour under the sun, because you can then mix to your heart's content. So it really does add that little wintry feel. And it's a colour that I don't get out very often, but it definitely adds a little something to wintry pieces. Particularly if you don't want to get out your ice paste or your snow paste, or it just will add that little bit of frostiness to it. Oh, the antiquing, I'm assuming you're referring to, Julie, surely does make a vast difference to your piece, to the pieces. There is no question about it at all. I don't think you'll ever see me use quite so much wax, but as I say, these are all core Pentart products. So yeah, I thought trip back to basics is sometimes just what is required, because we have them in our stash, we buy them, don't we, and then we forget about them, and that's not necessarily good. Well, there we are, just there we are. Let's get the right lids on. So turtle green, green, chameleon. Let me de-yuck those fingers, because I'm going to add, I could have picked brass. There isn't really a brown wax. Well, there is, but it's an antique paste. So we're just going to lightly kiss some of these with a little bit of gold for a bit of shimmer and lightness, just because that's how I'm feeling. We might add the white gold, which is a softer colour. There we are. Again, that's not a colour I get out to use that often, as by seen by the fact that the pack's almost full. Oops, that was a bit heavy-handed. If you're ever heavy-handed, then just get yourself some transparent wax, which I haven't got on the table, but that will help lift off the excess quite nicely. There we are. So we've used metallic metal paints, we've got used metallic waxes, and we've used 2 of the chameleon waxes there. All core staples from Pentart. Okay. Now then, let us just grab, because I know I need these. Let's just move some of the mess out of the way. So we've only got out on here the bits that we need, no distracting, and a pot of heavy body gel. Let's clean that, and let's just add well, that wasn't clever, was it? Right, let's pop that onto there. I know I need the depth of 2 of these. These are just, for those of you who are wondering what these are just canvas bases from but they make really useful props. Now you can see why I wanted those little bits there. So there is our stag centralized. Now this will be a bit more of a head trauma, but what this is going to do, so I'm using the heavy body gel matte because that's my preference. Okay, which dries opaque. So just be aware of that. If you squidge it out at the sides, then you definitely are likely to need a little bit of extra. Pop that underneath there. Make sure we haven't got that showing. There we are. Pop that onto there. Pop that there. Pop that there. And then I've got a space for here. So I've got big blobs there at the moment, and those will dry opaque, which is not necessarily what I want. So there we are. Let's just pop that into there. That can go there. And then we're going to pop that down. Build some of this layers up. So I'm going to pop another leaf underneath there. And what's left at the end, I will clear up. Well, there we are. Talk about managing to miss a piece. Where's those waxes? Get the right lid. Right, so now we're going to pop a pine cone into there, a pine cone into there. Let's just keep our stag vaguely in the right direction. There we are, that can go into there. Let's just tuck that into there. And I'm not worried about stuff going on and off the sides, as you can see. I'm quite happy to have my pieces in and around. There can go into there. There we are. Let's tuck you into there. And I want that one can go underneath and in there. There we are. Go on, in you go. And these will all take a little while to set, but they will eventually set into place. So there we are. We have the composition. It's all looking a bit dark. I can see blobs of heavy body gel, and that will show. So let me just take those off there. Okay. From there. Come there. Let us just grab the pan. So we've got some little bits of natural moss here. So I'm just going to stick some of these little pieces of moss in, just to break it up a little bit. Thank you. I hope so. I do think about what I'm going to do. So, and then it's just a question of playing then. Oops, that had blue paint on it. I don't necessarily want blue paint. But there we are. And stick that into there. Let me just tuck you into there so that you're sticking out. That's better. Let's just make sure you are now upright. You can lift that off, poke that down the arm underneath there. So I'm filling in gaps. We'll get rid of that and find a clean one. I've got lots of them. There we are. I might as well use it. Okay. So we'll just tuck some extra bits of moss in amongst the areas, just to fill it in just a little bit. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. This is a silicone tool, so it won't get destroyed by me popping. I'm going to need a bit of glue onto that though. There we are. It's looking particularly sad, is that piece of moss? So let's just grab something that's not quite looking quite as sad. Take some of you. Pop that into there. Stick it underneath, into there. And this is when you can just carry on forever, I'm afraid. Fiddling, playing, perhaps. There we are. Let's just shuffle that in there. Okay. I'm going to lid that, and I do have, on the side, some snow crystal paste. Now this paste looks white, and it has white bits and glittery bits in it. It's very different to the ice crystal paste. So it will give a white speckling to this when it dries. And let's just grab. So it's going to add to it. So I've used my sparkling silver. And I'm just going to, it will stick, honestly. Pounce this on. It's more subtle than a lot of the paste. And I can add some bits with what's left. It'll just add a little bit of shimmer into here. And that clearly now needs to go back into there. There we are. So let me just, oh, I've still got, that's okay. I've still got paste there. So let's just add some of this in and around. Do need to just let some of this dry. And I might go back and add some more of this once it's dry so I can see what I've got where when it's better. There we are. So there we are, ladies. Here is our majestic King of the Woods. So I will come up with a project for next week. The new Stamperia collection Quiet Time has arrived in the house. It arrived courtesy of the distributor in the UK. There we are. It's irritating me, but there we are. I can sit there. About 4 hours ago. So I might do Christmas, but I might well actually do something with that. And depending on how I feel, I might just do a live at the weekend, or I might not. So watch for my page. So ladies, thank you very much for your company this evening. I apologise for wittering on for an hour and a half, but projects take as long as projects take, I think. I hope you liked the make and that it was helpful to go back to some of the basics. I will see you online soon. Bye.